Okay, so we're going to get started now. Thank you all for coming out tonight to yet another wonderful meeting of the Florida State University chapter of the International Association of Emergency Managers. Tonight, our speaker will be Rose Whitehair. She's a senior consultant in public assistance with Tetra Tech. She's going to speak to us all about basically emergency management in Native American tribal territories. She helped FEMA write the book on tribal EM, tribal ops, and tribal continuity of operations. Also helps guide their outreach and formats for Ready Indian Country. She, besides her current position as a senior consultant in public assistance with Tetra Tech, she's also served as an adjunct instructor and trainer with FEMA, a disaster recovery manager and recovery director with the New Mexico Department of Homeland Security and Emergency Management, a disaster response and recovery subject matter expert with High Watermark LLC, and as director of the Navajo Nation Department of Emergency Management. She graduated from the University of Arizona's College of Medicine in 2007, and also from the University of New Mexico with the Bachelor's in Emergency Medical Services in 2002. So, Rose, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for being our speaker tonight. This is going to be so interesting to hear all about this. And I now pass the floor over to you.
Sure, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that wonderful introduction. It's like, I heard all of that and I'm like, whoa, I did a lot. That's awesome. Well, thank you. And I'm thanking, just taking a moment here to just introduce myself in my language, Swahili initially. My name is Rose Whitehair. I'm originally from Window Rock, Arizona. In fact, my clan goes back about 16 generations to the Navajo Nation in the area where we live in Window Rock, Arizona, which is now called Window Rock, Arizona. And I'm currently in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I'm working as a senior consultant for, as you mentioned, Tetra Tech. So I help them basically with all of the stuff that you see behind me. So everything that has to do with COVID disaster response to the FEMA stuff that happens, everything with COVID PA, and then also with the CARES Act and the ARP, you name it. I'm basically interpreting it for all of our people within our clients and with Tetra Tech. So it's something that I actually really do like doing. It's basically looking at all of these different things, all of the different acts and the bills, and then also just piecing it together, all of the different intricacies with like how does the American Rescue Plan interact with homeowners? How does the omnibus bill how was that impacted by the Consolidated Appropriations Act? How was the CARES Act defined? Where did families first come into it? All of that stuff. Just like I said, just basically looking at all of the different intricacies, and then also looking at all of the different OIG stuff, the FAQs, the guidance, and all of the different things that come out, and just keeping a track of that. And so I'm running out of space on the wall behind me. but it's good. Keeps me busy. So I started also reaching out, or I started working on the training aspects for Tetra Tech as well too. So doing that, that's a new thing that came to my plate today, in fact. So kind of a nice little change of pace. So what I wanted to do was just give you guys all a little bit of background, a little bit of information on tribes, and then also just give you a brief rundown of some misconceptions that you may think of tribes, and then also kind of have it as a little Q&A session as well. So I hope that that's going to be okay with you guys. Is that okay? And if you have any questions, feel free to raise your hand. You can do it virtually if you want to on the little chat thing, or you could just raise your hand. Okay. So did you want me to go ahead and did you want to run the PowerPoint for me, or did you want me to do it yourself?
What would you prefer? I could do either.
It doesn't matter.
Okay, I enabled screen sharing for multiple participants, so you should be able to.
Okay. Great. All right, let me see if I can do this now. Right, hold on. All right, so tell me what I need to do here.
You just hit the green share screen. I see at the bottom in the middle of all the options. You should be able to.
Yes, got it.
Yeah, I figure you sharing it makes it so that you don't have to tell me, next slide, next slide, next.
Okay, got it. Okay, so can you guys see my screen okay?
Yep, looks good.
All right, great. So, see if I can make it a little bit bigger. There we go. Okay. As we mentioned, a lot of the work I do is basically from the work that I did as an emergency manager for the Diné Nation. And roughly, the Navajo Nation is roughly the size of West Virginia. And unfortunately, even though you think of West Virginia or Switzerland, it's also bigger than Switzerland. You think of how many law enforcement officers there could be, how many firefighters there could be for an entire state, how many groceries there could be. Just imagine how many grocery stores there are in West Virginia right now. Imagine how many firefighters there are in West Virginia right now, or law enforcement. So if you have roughly, like I said, the same amount of people or the same amount of land, square miles, acreage, in the Navajo Nation, we have roughly 7 fire districts and roughly only 11 firefighters. We have full-time firefighters. The rest are occasional volunteers, like myself. I was a volunteer, and that's how I know from firsthand knowledge. Law enforcement officers, we only have roughly 200. And as for grocery stores, we only have roughly 11 grocery stores for the entire Navajo Nation. And there is a lot of different factors, different variables to the reason why there is such tribal inequity. And starting off first, what I'd like to be able to make sure that everyone is aware of is that everybody thinks of the, hold on a second. Usually what I hear is, what about the BIA? Isn't the BIA, the Bureau of Indian Affairs, supposed to help you all? Well, the Bureau of Indian Affairs was actually the Department of War on the American Indians. So back, way back, in the late 1700s, early 1800s, the War Department was formed. And that was basically to look at the different functions that would include building out exploration of the Wild West, also looking at what you see now, a lot of the impacts that you probably see or have heard of on TV or in the news that states that tribal governments have had termination era. We've had different eras that we have lived through. The boarding school era, where I'm not sure if any of you have heard of this yet, but recently in Canada, there were 215, they found a burial site, a mass burial site of 215 children, Indigenous children, Native or First Nations children. Up there, they call themselves First Nations. First Nations children that were found in a site on the Kamloops lands. And the same thing has happened here in the United States. And it was a given that if you were sending your children off to these residential schools, that most likely you would never see them again. And the thought back then was to save the man, kill the Indian, basically, is what the motive was back then. And we all know that the U.S. has been all tribal lands prior to people coming in from different areas. It wasn't just only from Europe or Spain, but also from other areas too, from Mexico and from, like I said, Spain as well. In fact, my grandmother, one of my great-great-grandmothers, that's where I received my first name from, was one of my great-great-grandmothers, who was actually stolen from my tribe, way back in the early 1800s, was taken down to Mexico by the Spaniards, was a slave, and bore children down there, but then she came back. And when she returned to our homelands, she had brought her children with her, and that's how we ended up with which means where the water flows together, and the Nakai means enemy people. So that's a good explanation of how these different impacts of different communities and different eras have impacted us in so many ways. So again, this is part of the history that most of the time gets washed over, and we don't really know, what the real story is. And so the real story is that again, this was originally the Department of War on the American Indian. The other part, when our treaties, that you may not hear a lot of as well, is that when our treaties were written, the tribal nations ceded millions and millions and millions of acres of land, so that in return, the US treaties had given us certain rights. So they told us that in exchange for the land, we would get healthcare, we would get education, and we would get subsistence for our families and our communities. And so when those lands were ceded, you will notice that within 2 generations, easily within 2 generations of when the lands were ceded, dams were brought in, DAMS, dams were brought in, and a lot of the rivers stopped flowing. So when a lot of these rivers stopped flowing through tribal lands, they stopped their planting, that just basically stopped the rivers from flowing towards these communities. And then not only were they unable to sustain themselves through agriculture, they actually were given, I don't know if you've ever seen the commodity foods where it has like pasteurized cheese, high fructose corn syrup, canned meats, flour, just all of these things that have like trans fatty acids and, oh my gosh, you name just the horrible stuff that they put in processed foods. So our tribal diet, which contained, like I said, agriculture and basically game and hunting and feeding ourselves off the land, was replaced by commodity processed foods. So within 2 generations, you have our people that were beginning to grow sideways and also beginning to become diabetic, become unhealthy, and we had no way to sustain ourselves anymore. So COVID actually has done a number on not only waking us up to remind all of us that we should be looking back to growing local food sources, not only for our own communities, but also for the times that, like right now, where the COVID, we've seen the economic impacts of what happens when the whole entire system fails, which it did, not only once, not only twice, but probably at least 3-4 different times in several different areas, including internationally. So again, these are all just different things that have happened to tribes that just normally isn't shared with people in general. So people think, usually you'll hear people say, like when I was in DC, I was always asked, "Oh, you're Native? I thought all of you guys were dead." And and I'm like, "No, we're still here." And we know our language and we know our culture, and we do what we can to sustain those through. That's what sustains us. But yeah, that's one of the questions I hear. Or another one is, well, I thought the government gives you guys money, or aren't you going to school for free? No, we're not going to school for free. I have student loans that I'm still trying to pay off, and I don't have the government giving me checks. We all don't have casinos, and we all don't have land either. There are some tribes that do not have land, and there are some tribes that don't have their own law enforcement. And you also have a number of tribes that are, there's approximately 376, I think, or 374, I can't remember what the latest count was, of tribal nations that are recognized federal tribes. There's also state recognized tribes too. And, but out of all of those, you have roughly 70 tribes that have some type of border, some type of tribal border with either Mexico or Canada or ports. So when I talked to Homeland Security, or when I was doing Homeland Security work, I always reminded them that you can pump as much money as you want into the states, but if you don't work with the tribes, then that's like a huge, like a sieve or a huge a drain where there's so many different areas that get money, but if you don't have money and help filtering to all these places that need it, that have a sincere ability to be able to help, but you don't recognize that help, or that they do recognize that help, then you're pumping money into a lot of things that really need to be worked on. So, okay. So the next slide I have here is the on the Navajo Nation. And this, were you there, Stefan, when I gave this presentation to wait? Well, I've given this presentation to the World Association for Disaster and Emergency Medicine, and I've also given it to the World Association of Science and Engineering and Medicine. And so I told them that basically that on the Navajo Nation itself, that we, again, roughly the size of West Virginia, that 911 and the golden hour is practically non-existent. So we were on the Navajo Nation doing test calls on the Navajo Nation. And depending on, and you'll see the little arrows on the slide, depending on where you are on the Navajo Nation, depending on your cell phone carrier, what type of cell phone you have, where you were, if you were calling from a landline, or if you were calling from a cell phone. I mean, just so many different variables. Our calls ended up in Denver, Colorado, Durango, Flagstaff, Arizona, Phoenix, Scottsdale, Arizona, Albuquerque, New Mexico, Bernalillo County, San Juan County, McKinley County, just all over the place. And so basically, when you're on the Navajo Nation, and when I teach FEMA, and I tell them, if you're going to go to tribal land, make sure that you find out what the local numbers are, because you have roughly 7 police districts on the Navajo Nation. You really should know what those police district numbers are, and have that paper ready, or at least loaded on your cell phone, because if you dial 911 and there is a domestic violence incident or a cardiac arrest, you're not going to get help. You're not going to get help immediately. In fact, your call could go to Denver, Colorado. Let's just say you're calling from Nahodishkish, and all of a sudden you're like I said, you call 911, you're thinking that you're going to get a police officer or the police district that you need to, and all of a sudden it goes up to Denver, Colorado. Denver, Colorado sends it to Gallup, New Mexico. Gallup, New Mexico sends it to Window Rock. Window Rock finally sends it to the correct district. So the potential for drop calls is always there. And also just the fact that you're not going to get help right away. So as I mentioned, the golden hour just really isn't there. And it's quite disheartening. And a lot of the reasons behind this is that the rural addressing needs to continue on the Navajo Nation. So many places right now, when I was an EMT or a firefighter back then too, we would get dispatched, and dispatch would tell us, okay, you're going to take a left on Aspen Road. You're going to go to where there's a pile of rocks on the 3 miles in. You're going to take a right at the Y. At the left, there's a tire, and then it's going to be the third hogan on the right with the blue roof. And so, I mean, that's, you have to try to remember that while you're driving, or while you're, setting up the ambulance for your patient care. So, yeah, and then try and remember your way out as you make your way back to the hospital. And so, yeah, it's pretty difficult at times. And the reason why this continues to be this way, and the reason why this continues to have very few economic development on the reservation, is that, again, with the BIA and the Bureau of Indian Affairs and all of these different agencies, such as the BIA is under the Department of the Interior. You also have USDA, you also have Bureau of Reclamation, you have IHS, you have EPA, you have all these different federal agencies that when they were building up their standard operating procedures or their standard operating guides for whatever it was that they're putting into their statutes, into their guidelines, into their policies, they fail to think of how their interactions, not talking to each other and not talking to the tribes, they fail to recognize that there was overlap. So what was happening is that you had one agency that come in and they, okay, this is gonna be our red tape. And then this other agency, this is our red tape, this is our red tape, red tape, red tape, red tape, red tape. And so what a non-native, I'll just use my mother for an example. My mom, when she has built her business on off-tribal land, she was able to do it within 7 steps. But when we do it on the Navajo Nation, it takes us 70 steps. So it's almost impossible because of all the different types of red tape that all these federal agencies not talking to one another has the impact of just creating so many barriers. And they're not intentional. Those are not intentional. It's just because they just completely did not talk to our tribal people. And they did not talk to each other because they didn't need to at that time. But when you have incidences that happen on the tribal land, such as the Gold King mine spill, which I was the incident commander of the Gold King mine spill. And if you haven't heard of the Gold King mine spill, you can Google it. It was basically what happened in 2015. In the summer of 2015, there were contractors that the EPA had hired to look at and reduce the amount of basically the contaminants that were up in the Gold King mines that were in Colorado. And somewhere, somehow, they had accidentally poked a hole and released millions, I think it was roughly 3 million gallons of toxic waste, toxic chemicals including barium, lead, arsenic. I mean, just all types of different chemicals that were released into the San Juan River, and which also made its way from the San Juan River all the way down into Lake Powell in Page, Arizona. They were still able to find traces. I was emergency manager at that time, and we had roughly 16 different chapters, 16 communities. Chapters are akin to counties. 16 communities, 250 miles of this toxic waste, where right now the tribe is still impacted by this because of the fact that, like I said, nobody wanted responsibility. And what I had to do as an emergency manager was try to figure out how the heck were we going to get, who was in charge of providing water to the Navajo Nation, what federal agency. And it wasn't, and again, here's the red tape. I can tell you firsthand, it wasn't just one. I had to work with IHS, I had to work with EPA, I had to work with BIA, I had to work with all these different agencies just to make sure that we had water coming in for our livestock, coming in for our agriculture, and also for the people to drink. And then also trying to work with FEMA as well, but we didn't get a Stafford Act declaration for it because of the fact that, like I said, the federal agency was the EPA that was taking the lead. So again, it just shows you that there's a barrage of just different agencies that at that time, when they were building their rules and their regulations, they just were not talking to each other. So because of that, you also have wildfires where we have to work with several different agencies and try and do the best we can to make sure that we bounce back as quickly as we can too. The photo that I have in the left with the little girl, this was actually on a Friday afternoon during the 2013 storms. We had roughly 88 out of 110 chapters that had some type of flooding, and it flooded on the Navajo Nation for roughly 3 months. 3 months, from July, August into September, basically. And that was a good 8-foot drop on that photo. And these kids were coming home from school. They were dropped off by their bus, and you could see they still had their backpacks on, and were trying to figure out a way to get over that wash to their to get to the other side. And the little grandma that's there, you can kind of see her in the photo. She is actually the one that reached out to a number of the community members to have them help her so that she could bring her grandchildren back home. And but again, this was a road without a right of way. And again, another area where we were unable to get FEMA's mitigation program to work because, and also there's a lot of these places that we were not able to get funding to get the roads rebuilt because of the fact that there was no right of way. So, and the reason why there was no right of way is because if you were to think about the right of ways, so just imagine, I'll tell you a little story here. So way back, if you can look at this picture in itself right now, if you look and you think of back in the early 1900s, way back, there's probably about 5 homes or 5 families that live in that area. And you have a man coming through, he's from the BIA, and all he does is he tells the people in the community going from house to house saying, I need your X mark. Because back then the Navajos were, that's how they were using, that's what they were using as their signature. If you look at the Navajo Treaty, you'll see X marks on the Navajo Treaty, except for one tribal leader that was able to sign his name. And, but the main thing with this, the story that I'm telling you is that he would go through these communities and he would get the X mark from these different community members for these roads. But if we were to do any type of like road maintenance or try and move the road over just a little bit to get past like certain areas that are in the wash instead of around the wash, the problem is that now in 2020, 2021, you have 5 families or the community that has been built now, you probably have 80 families there and roughly 5,000 signatures that you need to get to be able to fix the right of way that originally didn't even, there really was no real right of way, if that makes sense. So to do the proper, to get the proper right of ways to build the road in the manner it should be done, it's a matter of trying to find 5,000 signatures, and there's people that are deceased now right now we did have a consultant that tried to get as many signatures as we could, and they were unsuccessful. So again, these are just a lot of the limiting factors of what we're still dealing with. And again, just the fact that we have so many places that agencies just didn't think about talking to the tribes about. And so now, because of that, you don't see much happening on tribal lands. And so it is quite difficult for us, and it continues to be quite difficult for us. The fix for this has been Executive Order 13175. So if you want to look that up, again, that's Executive Order EO 13175. In fact, I'll go ahead and put that in the chat. So what that does is that it is an executive order signed by the president. It was originally signed, actually the first stuff that was signed off, making sure that tribes were involved, was actually from in the 70s, and then Bill Clinton and then also in the 80s, I believe, was it the 90s? I can't remember. And then most recently by President Barack Obama, that those executive orders were reauthorized and brought back to the table again, where federal agencies have to consult with the tribes. So if you ever see tribal consultation for anything, that's the federal agencies making sure that they work directly with the tribes to make sure that they are doing their due diligence to make sure that this doesn't continue. Everything that you see here that I am sharing with you on these slides. The negative aspects anyway. So let me move on to my next page. So what I would like to share with you is that there are a number of good things that are still happening with the tribes. So we still have, as I mentioned, our culture, our heritage, our language, our traditions. And back in the, when Ready.gov and ReadyIndianCountry was actually coming out, FEMA was looking to revamp their outreach to the tribes. And they had asked, they basically asked us when I was working at the Embassy of Tribal Nations, how do we do our outreach to the tribes? And we just told them that basically they need to make sure that they work with us closely and to use modern pictures and showing the modern outreach of what is really happening out there, and also the technology that we're using. So like so many places don't realize that we have the ability to do a lot of things out there on tribal nations, on tribal lands, and it's just a matter of just getting us involved. And so we have a lot happening with training out in several different areas. We have let me see right here. You have bomb awareness, you have sandbagging, we have our tribal cert classes that we teach. And then also we have EOCs that we work together with, the tribal cert classes as well. We also have the tank car and explosions and back in oil training, all kinds of stuff that we're doing out there in several different areas. And it's not just one thing, it's not just one tribe, but there is a lot happening out there. And it's just a matter of just working with the people. So when you're working with tribal communities, basically almost every federal agency and almost every state that has tribes has a tribal liaison. So I would definitely work with those people. So FEMA, you can just Google FEMA tribal liaison and those names will come up. So, or Homeland Security, they have tribal liaisons. Commerce, Department of Commerce has a tribal liaison. Treasury has a tribal desk. All of them, they have tribal liaisons. And so those would be, if you ever need to work with tribes, your best bet is not to cold call the tribes. Your best bet is to, like I said, work with the tribal liaisons, and they can work with you to make sure that they help connect you to the right people. Okay, this is a picture, these are pictures of my young one. This was during her her ceremony. And again, this is just showing that we're still doing everything we can to keep our culture alive. And there's different stories and deities that we work with, making sure that we maintain those stories. And then also what she's making is she's grinding corn, and she grinds corn for 4 days. And on the 5th days, for 4 days. And every day people are putting more and more jewelry on her. And so like she actually gets filled with jewelry, and it gets heavier and heavier. And also on the last day, in the evening of the fourth day, she makes this huge cake in the ground, a big giant corn cake, and it gets cooked in the earth overnight, and that's called afkan. And you'll see all the families come together, and this was right before COVID hit. All the families came together, and they help with making the the ceremonial cake, and everybody partakes. The next day we butcher sheep, we all eat, we feast, and everybody comes to help, including the fire department. The local fire department. These are all the guys that I helped train, some of them, and then also they've been watching my little one grow up since she was a youngin' too, because I've always taken her to the fire stations as well. So it was really neat to see everybody come out and help and be a part of that. So I'm almost done with my slides, and then we'll just move on to Q&A. If I think we have time for that, right? Question and answer session. Okay, great. So for the COVID response and recovery, the last thing I was going to go ahead and just talk about is there was definitely a disconnect here as well. But luckily at that time, I was also the EOC director for the state of New Mexico, and just working with a number of the tribes for a number of years now, I was able to connect a lot of the needs, such as PPE, when there were shortages, and I think all of you knew that there were shortages during the supply chain for the N95 masks, and then the shortages of KN95s, and everything that we needed, including gowns and gloves. Oh my gosh, it was definitely a scary time at that time. But when we were able to get those resources, we made sure that we worked as best we could to be able to get those resources out to the tribal communities first and foremost, because unfortunately, the CDC had the funding mechanism in place for the tribes. However, they had the funding, but they didn't have the mechanism in place to be able to get the PPE directly to the tribes. So what we did at the state level was we made sure that the tribes got whatever resources we came in, we made sure and got those out to them first. And the reason why they got it first, because there were so few of them, and so we was just like giving a little bit here, giving a little bit there, giving a little bit. It was just only a small handful, because they didn't really need that much at that time in terms of what everybody else was demanding for all of those other places in the state. So we did what we could to make sure that they were first in line. And usually it's always a trickle down method, but we made sure that the tribes were first. The other thing that we did was we also made sure that we trained all of our National Guard men and women to be able to go out there and work with the communities to know what's expected. There were some times where people were afraid that the National Guard were going to have to hold off and restrict travel coming into certain areas or onto tribal lands or into the state of New Mexico. And we really had to do a lot of outreach. One of the key things I can tell you guys all as emergency managers is to always, always, always make sure that you have a PIO or some type of person that's going to do press releases or some type of regular PIO type of stuff for you. Because if you don't, then the problem is that if you don't feed the media, they're going to feed on you. So if you don't feed them regularly on a regular basis, they will eat you up alive. They will go with whatever they hear, even if it's just a rumor, they will go off on that and you are toast. So your best bet, and that's one thing that I learned as an emergency manager, is that your best bet is to always make sure that you have a PIO, make sure that you take some type of public relations course so that when you are ready, you will be in front of that camera, or you can at least have the talking points ready for your leadership, your governor, your tribal leader, your mayor, so that they are able to answer those hard questions, because those questions are going to come. And one of the things that you do not want to do as an emergency manager is that there's just no way to sugarcoat death, destruction, a lot of those types of, the things that we deal with disasters. But you got to have the facts, and you got to keep it brief, short, simple, and to the point, because if not, like I said, people, we don't have the ability to to have the attention to be focused on anything for a very long time. So we want to make sure that you keep it short, succinct, and precise. And that's what I can share with you as an emergency manager. So again, with this COVID response and recovery, we just made sure that we opened up our JIC. So we made sure that that was maintained on a regular basis, and that was a key part of our element and of the whole EOC. As I mentioned, that's the main thing that you got to do. Also, making sure that everybody is trained across the board, everybody at the same level of training. So like, when you're doing your ICS 214 forms, when you're doing, you make sure that everybody is trained in the IS courses, the 100, 700, 200, 800, 300, 400. I think you guys all know those classes that I'm talking about. All of those FEMA level courses, you have to have everybody all trained at the same level, because when you're talking to an administrator person down here and you say, okay, well, I'm going to need these 214s from that place, that I'm going to need it from fire, EMS, ESF units, I'm going to need it from ESF 14, 16, blah, 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 blah. You know, you're just going down the line. Your administrative person is able to say, okay, yeah. And they're not like looking at you all lost, like, oh, what's a 214? You know, you want to be able to have everybody across the board trained directly, no matter what level they are on the chain, that they're all trained at the same exact capacity, so that you don't leave anybody lost when the time comes, when the hits the fan. You guys are all ready and you're ready to go. So yeah. Okay, next. Okay, so training. Everybody across the board, again, training from your young people, from your volunteers, to your fire, to your CERT people, to even the people that you're going to call when you're out doing damage assessments. So all of that, like I said, it's good for everybody to be all trained across the board on the same manner, because you have, when bad things do happen, you guys get burnt out, you're tired, you've been out in the field doing damage assessments in one section of the city or the county, and there's like 200 homes that have been impacted, and you're still trying to feed, you're still trying to do damage assessments, you don't know where the water's coming from, you need to figure out, I mean, there's just so many things happening at the same time, that instead of you being the one that's trying to do operations, logistics, and planning, you know that you don't have to worry about planning, or you don't have to worry about logistics, because again, you're all trained at the same level, and you know that things are moving, and you're able to make those quick decisions as quickly as you can, because everybody's moving, everybody's being a part, everybody's being involved. So like during Gold King mine spill, or during the floods that we had for the Navajo Nation, all those, or the fires, we had like, gosh, 16 camps that got put up right away. We had spike camps, we had just these different incident command posts, and all of these guys and all of these different ICPs were all doing their same thing. And then all they did was just send in their information to us. Okay, Rose, we're gonna need some hay. Rose, we're gonna need some water over here. Rose, we're asking for this. Rose, we need this. Rose, we need that. And it's like, okay, planning, you guys know what you need to do. Logistics, you know what you need to do. Operations, you need to do. Let's go, let's go, let's go. And then it just, things just keep moving, keep moving, keep moving, keep moving. And it feels good when everything falls together like the way it should. Everything falls together like the way people are supposed to be trained. So this is another example of technology for the tribes. So this is the EOC of the Navajo Nation. What we did is we put web EOC on all of these computers, and in the state of New Mexico, we did the same thing. We opened up web EOC for all of the different community members, all of the counties, and all of the tribes. So everybody was able to log in and put their requests into web EOC as quickly as they could, and they were able to follow it and track it. So we did use that technology there. Another thing that was a key part with technology that was pretty awesome is that we had, I think there were roughly about, I can't remember if it was 300, and I think it was roughly about 314 homes that were impacted during flooding in New Mexico. And then also on the Navajo Nation itself, there were, I think, roughly 50 homes that we had to go out. So these two ladies here were actually GPSing locations with FEMA. And at the same time, they were also interpreters for Navajo for the communities, because they were going out to community areas that were so deep res that there were Navajo speakers only in those areas. So again, combining technology with the ability to be able to have them speak our own native language to our community members, that was really key too. So it's just those are some of my favorite photos that I just wanted to share with all of you, and continue to keep teaching, continue to keep training. That's all I got. So pending any questions.
Sure, yeah, thank you for that presentation. That was very informative, and definitely some really cool pictures, and really cool to, really get a glimpse into that world. So first of all, I see Cody Macon messaged me earlier that his mic is not working, but he does have a question. As far as the tribes, I guess specifically the Navajo tribe, he asked, how do they overcome PPE shortages due to COVID-19?
So right now, what a number of the tribes should be doing is they should be working with IHS, Indian Health Service. And so what happened is, as I mentioned, the CDC didn't have the mechanism in place to be able to get the PPE to the tribes. And so now what they did is they worked out a mutual aid agreement with IHS, the Indian Health Service, and the IHS should be able to work through, or the tribe should be able to work through IHS, their Indian Health Service, to be able to get that PPE directly covered, directly sent to them. If they are going to get PPE on their own, then there is funding available for that as well under emergency protective measures for FEMA PA. And there's also funding available for that under the CARES Act and also ARP as well.
Cool, thank you. And he also messaged, by chance you have the ISBN handy? I think he meant for some of the training courses, like ISBN.
Oh, yeah, you mean all the IS courses?
I'm assuming that's what he means. Cody, I guess if you want to clarify in the chat, I'll give you a moment. Oh, that was for the book mentioned. What it was a training book, I think, right?
Yeah, it's actually the all the IS courses. Yeah, FEMA does have that. They actually have there is a course. There's like a list. I don't know how many pages it is, but they're all IS courses that are all listed. Yeah, if you want that, I can easily send that.
Yeah. Actually, I think he was talking about Actually, apparently he was talking about a book for a class at FSU. I guess that Alex Griffin mentioned, Rob McDaniel's Leadership and Communications and Emergency Management class, where public information officer type of subject matter is very much taught and discussed in that class. But anyway, related to what you mentioned, yeah, sure. If you'd like to send us the links to, I guess, tribal related FEMA IS courses and things of that nature, I could definitely include them in our email to send out to people. They can take a look at that.
Sure, definitely. Yeah, for sure. And then also I have some of the PowerPoints on my LinkedIn profile. So if you go to my LinkedIn, you'll see all of the PowerPoints that I have for like the Sciot Lake wildfire, the Gold King mine spill. I don't even remember what else I have in there. I have a number of them that I've uploaded there too. So, and those are, I think I was able to pull some of these photos from those PowerPoints as well. Yeah, there's tribal, there's emergency management for tribal governments, emergency operations for tribal governments, continuity of operations. And then there's also a new one that we worked on that was recently released. Actually, that we'd worked on it for like 6 years. That one is the tribal disaster recovery. And that one's new, but I can definitely send that out to you as well.
Yeah.
That's a great course, the tribal disaster recovery. I just took that myself.
Yay,
it was very interesting.
Who gave that class to you? Who gave that class to you?
Oh, I cannot remember.
Was it through NCAI or LSU, or Was it through a university?
Oh, sorry. I'm thinking of the IS tribal recovery course, not the sorry. I'm trying to find this class information for Cody at the same time, and I heard you saying it, but I was just working with a tribe, so I was kind of trying to soak up as much information as I could in a short period of time.
Yeah, sure. No worries. Yeah, all of that tribal stuff is the stuff that we put together. You should have seen it. Can I give you an inside story? So FEMA came to us when I was living in DC at NCAI. Don't tell FEMA this, they're probably gonna get mad. But FEMA came to us and they said, "Hey, Rose," and it was myself and Robert. We were the main two, Robert Holden. If you ever get a chance to talk to Robert Holden or Steve Golubik, oh my God, that's my sensei and my Obi-Wan. Those two are like, man, they're geniuses. Anyway, so those two, they had asked, FEMA had asked us to help them with their outreach to tribes because they had, it wasn't done. And again, Executive Order 13175 had just came out or revamped. And so they asked us, how do we do this? How do we outreach to the tribes? So we're like, well, you're definitely going to want to do some research first and come back in a month and do your research first and then come back. So they came back and then they showed us these brochures, and the brochures were they had these sepia tone images of American Indians with like the giant headdresses standing in front of teepees, and we're like, no. No. And the brochures themselves said tribes have been around for over millennia, and it was just like this holistic, oh man, how do you say it, like where they put tribal people, indigenous people on a pedestal. We're like, no, don't do that. Don't do that. Let's just let us help you. And that's how we told them, use modern images. Don't use the sepia tone old images from way back, because that's somebody's grandmother or grandfather, that didn't realize that they were going to be used on an image for FEMA or Homeland Security or whatever. And so you want to be respectful of those images, because that's not what, first of all, that wasn't what that photo was taken for. And second of all, use modern images. We're still here. So that's how we ended up using a lot of the more modern images for the Ready Indian Country brochures that you saw on the slide that I had up above. Let me see. Yeah, that one right there, because it was pretty funny because of the fact that they didn't really know. So then they reached out to us again to say, hey, we need help with the tribal EM courses and the tribal operations courses. And that's where I worked with Katie Hurt and her team to make sure that all of the tribal stuff was brought up to par with being modernized, basically. So.
Wow, cool. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Alex, were you going to say something, or?
Sorry, I was going to ask, while you were at FEMA, did you happen to work with Tanya Shannon at all? She was working on a lot of that training stuff, also on the recovery.
Tanya Shannon, I think the person I was mainly working with, he was out of Washington State, is where he was, is the main person I was working out of. Let me see if I have that.
Oh, and by the way, as far as the slides you mentioned on your LinkedIn, we'll make sure to also include your LinkedIn in the email with, your slides and all this information and the recording and everything, so people can check that out too.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
Let me see if it'll come up. I'm putting tribal disaster recovery. This is the one I was talking about. Let me see if it comes up. Community resources, pre-disaster recovery. Here it is. Yeah, this is the one. Can you guys see my screen? Or did I?
Yeah, we can still see your screen. Yeah, it's still on the PowerPoint.
Yeah. So, it's still on PowerPoint?
Yep.
Okay, hold on. Let me do new share. Right here. Okay, so this is the one I was talking about, Alex.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so this is the one that we had worked on. This one took us a long time. It did take some time to get this put together, but yeah, you see. So this is all of the everything from partnerships to planning to even like some traditional aspects too of planning. And so that's one key thing that when I was working with the governor's office, we had with the governor's office with the state of, so these are all the people that we worked with. And there I am right there, Navajo Nation. All of these guys, if you have any questions and you see their names, gosh, don't hesitate to ask because they are all really, really good people. Any of the people here in the acknowledgements page on page 7, they're just, oh my gosh. The great thing I can say about everybody that works on tribal lands, especially in EM, they are not hesitant to share information with you at all. They're just such good people, and everybody's always so open, and you learn a lot, and you just need to ask. So that's one thing that I can definitely share with you guys. Let me see.
Yeah, are you able to include this PDF in our information that we can send out?
Yeah, in fact, yeah, I can do that. I'm trying to see if I can. Let me see how so what I did, actually, you know what? I'm trying to move it up. There we go. All right, Control C. And we go to, hold on, see if I can share it in the chat.
Yeah, I mean, if not, you can just email it to me or send it on LinkedIn. I can include it either way.
Okay, all right, I'll do that.
Okay. I saw that Sam Gelibert said in the chat, let's see, spectacular presentation. Do you have any recommended EM-focused tribal literature, whether it's books, reports, scholarly articles, or broader tribal literature that you personally feel would be advantageous for an emergency manager or any professional engaging in tribal work? I guess obviously this PDF would be included in all that. And what else of all those sorts of things would you recommend, most highly?
Sure. Like I said, the main one would be definitely that looking at that PDF itself, looking at that pre-disaster right here. Now I was able to finally pull it in. The disaster recovery planning guide for tribal governments. And then what I would do is I would also look at the recovery. Let me see if they still have it. Let me see. So I would definitely look at this pre-disaster recovery planning guide for tribal governments. And then I would also look at let me see, hold on a second. I would look at the FEMA, if they still have them, the FEMA working with tribal governments is a good class. Those are the two main things that I would definitely look at for sure. Two main things to start off with. And then also, like I said, if you're interested in just talking to people, you're more than welcome to just, reach out to me. The crazy thing is that with tribal emergency managers, the circle is really, really, really small. All of us know each other. I mean, there's very few of us, and most of us end up staying in this field for such a long time that we're always here. Hardly any of us ever move on because, I guess we're just super dedicated to do this.
Yeah, no, I'm sure. I think a lot of people in EM are like that, very dedicated. I've heard of EM just in general being a small, tight-knit community. I mean, I know that's definitely the case in Florida, which is a very EM relevant state because of hurricanes and flooding. And I know the Florida EM community is fairly tight-knit. Everyone kind of knows each other. So yeah, I'm definitely sure that holds up in other areas of the country as well. One thing I did want to ask personally, and if other people have more questions, that's fine too. But I'm curious, the goal key mind spill. Did those waters ever like clear up somewhat, or like how did that turn out ultimately?
Science.
Okay.
Yeah, it was mainly so the one thing that, and this is what I loved about science too, because I was able to explain it to people by telling them, like, remember acids and bases in high school, where you learn about acids and bases. So the majority of stuff that was flowing down from the river or from the Gold King mines was acidic. So it was mainly acids. And so what they did is there's three basins that are, so here's the Gold King mine. And then there's three basins that they set, and those basins actually have bases in them. So the acids are coming down, they treat it with bases, and so the water that goes down to the Navajo Nation and the San Juan River is actually cleaner than it's ever been before. And unfortunately, one of the things that I had to share with people is that those mines have been leaking for over 100 years. They've been leaking bad stuff over 100 years. And so I had to tell them that, yes, there's bad things, but the problem is that they've been leaking for over 100 years. And now the water is cleaner than it's ever been before, unfortunately. And so they're treating the acids with bases right now. The only time that, and the water is relatively clear now. Like I said, it's cleaner now than it's ever been before. The only time that there are times of turbidity is during moments of rain, when the bottom part of the rivers get swirled around, moved around, and then that has that tendency to bring the stuff back up to the surface. But other than that, like I said, right now they're treating the acids with the bases, and it's much cleaner now.
Wow, yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Well, I have another question or two, but does anyone else have anything they'd like to ask? Open floor, don't be shy.
Yeah, even ask me like emergency management questions. Ask me like crazy stuff. You won't believe the crazy stuff that happens.
Yeah, you guys want to put something in the chat or unmute yourselves, just go for it.
I have another quick question. So my experience with tribes, I'm with a consulting firm also, and for a short time was working on a tribe who was running a mobile vaccination campaign. So I know within my research, when we were trying to get FEMA to kind of say, yeah, we'll give you some money for that, we were using kind of the example of the Navajo Nation a lot, because at the time that I was doing that, it was close to, I believe, when you guys had reached herd immunity, that 70%. So would you be able to speak on that kind of campaign a little bit, and like the Indian Health Services role in providing vaccines to people, and just the level of efficiency that the Navajo Nation was able to do that in?
Sure. It's funny because like when you look at actually doing the work and you're providing services, or I don't know, I think it's just me as an emergency manager, and then also just me just giving you a little bit of background. When I was a firefighter and when I was an EMT, I was always trained to expect the worst. Always expect the worst. So if you're en route to a vehicle accident, and we used to call them 6.2s, 9.62s. So if you're en route to a 6.2 and you're getting into the habit of thinking, oh, it's just going to be another fender bender, and all of a sudden it's like a 7-car pile up with like extrication and dead bodies and all kinds of stuff. You're not mentally prepared to handle that. You get overwhelmed and like, but if you're already mentally being prepared to think of, okay, what if it's not a fender bender? What if it's this, and this? All right, I want to make sure that I'm going to have extrication ready. I want to make sure that I have additional ambulances, additional resources. Let's get those IV lines ready. Make sure the ER knows. I mean, you're going. You're thinking about everything that possibly could happen. So the same thing happened with our EOC in New Mexico, where I was watching everything that was happening, because this little res girl was able to get the information that was coming in, saying, okay, COVID is leaving China. There's transports happening in Alaska and Hawaii, and Florida and California, all of these things, all of these ships were sitting in ports. And I'm thinking, oh my God, you know, this is going to get bad. And so I was letting the generals know. I was letting, we had generals, we had mutual aid in the EOC, we had multi-agencies that were all there in the EOC. And at first it was just only me and a couple of other people. And I said, this is going to get bad. We really have to think about the potential that it really could really hit us bad. And sure enough, it did hit. In fact, everybody got hit super, you know, as you know, super bad. Navajo Nation, it was the same thing. I was terrified of everything that could happen. And but as emergency managers, that's what we prepare for. And so what we did is that, like I said, we made sure that the tribes had everything that they needed from the state level. So making sure that coordination was there. That was the key thing, is making sure that coordination was there. If there was going to be somebody there that wasn't going to be receptive on what we needed to do, we made sure that we had a backup, or somebody higher, or somebody higher, or somebody higher. So we even got to the president of the Navajo Nation and told him, sir, this is coming your way. We need to make sure that you guys are going to be there to get it, that somebody's going to be there to get it, because we want to make sure that all of the supplies get there, or all of this PPE, or all of this food. And so again, making sure that you have that contact there, and then also making sure that you have another contact and another. You have to have at least 3 contacts in to make sure that you have the ability that if this first contact fails, or the second, or the third, that you at least have a 4th contact that can be able to step in. Because most of our calls, or most of our stuff that happens is like on a Friday night, you know, or a Saturday morning. And it's like, it can't wait, because these are all eggs. You know, you have like 2 dozen, or you have like 2 semi-truck fulls of eggs, you know, or something. You just get the oddest things that happen at 8 o'clock on a Friday night, or like I said, you know, on a Saturday or a Sunday. And you just need to be able to make sure that you have those contacts. That's the main thing, is having the contacts there. Because if you don't have the buy-in from one person, or if you don't have the cell phone number, or if you don't have, if you have to have the contacts, is the main thing, is what I'm trying to say. Because if there's a person that's out, or if there's a person that's not a priority for them, you make it the priority for somebody else, until, like I said, you get all the way up to the top of the leadership to be able to make things happen. So that's how we were able to make things happen, not only through EOC, but also through the Navajo Nation, making sure that that we worked with their IHS systems, so that their IHS systems had the support that they needed as well too. So there were times that they even reached out to us for help, and we did what we could to supply it. And again, it all had to do with all of our points of contacts. Always. The only thing I can say is always have a good point of contact, and always have a backup, and then another backup for those points of contact. So when you reach out, make sure that you find out who their deputy is, find out who their boss is too, and then also, you know, maybe some other people that may be able to get things done too, that would be helpful as well. Because Navajo Nation doesn't only have a Department of Emergency Management, they also have a commission on emergency management, and they also have IHS, and they also have the president's office. And at that time, there was also the HCOC, the Health Command Operations Center. So there's all these different variables and all these different points of contacts that we were able to use to be able to make sure that we had continuity of services.
I see in the chat, Sam Gelibert has asked, are there any templates or strategies involving contingency plans or complexity managers in the industry that are taught, or is it intuitively developed with experience?
Yeah, there's continuity of operations plans. So if you look up FEMA COOP, or FEMA continuity of operations, there should be plenty of templates in there for continuity of operations. I think that with COVID, during this whole pandemic, we had to really step up everything that we needed to for COOP plans. Even in our EOC, oh my God. Our EOC at the state, we had we had 3 different EOCDs that, and we trained so that we could have one shift here come in, this, and then this other shift would interlap with that shift, and then this other shift would come in and they would interlap, right? So there was shift A, shift B, shift C, and they would interlap, so that in case this one went down, this one would step in, and then this other one would step in, or this one got burnt out, their teams, or if this one got COVID, this whole group got COVID, this one would step in, and it would enter. The one day that we got hit with a COVID positive in our EOC was the one day that all of us were in a meeting together. Yes. So all of us, all 3 of us EOCDs, all had to step back and stay at home for 2 weeks because somebody came into our EOC that was COVID, that had a COVID positive test. And so that completely slammed us all in the face, like, what do we do now? We weren't planning on, like, what were we thinking? And so we actually had to bring in other people that we trained that train with us on a regular basis, because I was an EOC instructor for the state as well. So we brought in other people that could step in the capacity of EOCDs. And we had to set up a COOP plan for our EOCD that was off-site. Well, it was on site, but it was a different building. So we already had things going, and we already had computers and everything going up and over, moving over here. But like I said, it was the personnel that we had to be able to bring in, that we had to rethink that whole process when you just things that you just don't think about. And it's like, oh man, hard lesson learned. Yeah, lots of lessons learned, that's for sure. So yeah, but there are templates out there. Long story for a short answer, sorry.
That's all right.
This is kind of a funny add-on to your story. At FSU, I want to say in February, and Stephanie, you could correct me if I'm wrong, because I think you know about this too. FSU, February 2021, not 2020, decided that every department needed a continuity of operations plan, every academic department. And so they came to the EMHS program and said, hey, can you guys pull students and have your students write the ConOps programs or plans? And the whole EMHS department was like, we're throwing our hands in the air. Like, we've told you guys you needed this forever, and you executed your own plans regardless of how unorganized it was. And now that you've already executed the plan, you're asking us to write a whole different one for you a year later. And it just seems like that's how it goes. But would you say that you're seeing just kind of an increase in the realization of the need for those plans? I mean, industry-wide, even just past the tribal sector.
Yes, definitely. I definitely am seeing it industry-wide. We're also seeing it at the state level, the county level, everywhere. And then also the fact that we're also realizing a lot of places in general are realizing that people can be productive at home and people can work from home. And I hope that this whole back to work and back to, business operations will take that into consideration for a lot of us. So, because right now I'm working from home and I love it. I love it. My daughter probably doesn't, but I do.
Yeah, hopefully flexibility with remote work has definitely, kind of become a new innovation or something, people have considered, more often, or something being more possible with, just their firm or their agency, especially just for people having job opportunity, right? If someone can get a job and like do it well, do it competently, even if they're like a state or 2 states away across the country, but they can like fully do the job on, a home laptop or equipment you can mail to them, or whatever it is, and there's proper like oversight in place, proper clock in, clock out in place, et cetera, then that'd be wonderful. That'd be wonderful if that's an option for people, because it's like more job opportunities and more ability to find qualified individuals and find talent, without necessarily making someone move across, a state or two or across the country. So that hopefully that's like a positive innovation, from all this like lockdown stuff,
Right.
So,
Right.
by the way, Cody suggested in the chat, check out the FEMA Continuity Excellence Series certification program as well. So yeah, I guess you guys should check that out if you're into continuity stuff. So well, I have a question, but does anyone else have anything they'd like to bring up? Put it in the chat, unmute themselves. Totally open floor. Okay. Well, something I'd like to ask, something that often interests me with disaster response recovery, would be faith-based nonprofits. Right, you have like the Baptist Disaster Relief and the Methodist and all these different like denominational faith-based groups. And it's interesting how thinking about those things in relation to different cultures, different regions of the country, demographics, etc. So I'm kind of curious about how how much presence there is of those sorts of groups in tribal territories, and kind of related to that. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm assuming, I guess I'll make a two-part, multi-part kind of thing for you to all answer at once. I'm assuming that like Native Americans today in America, people in the tribes, I'm assuming there's probably a mix of like people involved in the tribal spiritual religious worldviews, but also let's say a variety of like the Christian denominations that are just predominantly found across the country, statistically most predominantly. And then kind of related to that, how do the faith-based groups, how much of a presence is there with the tribal communities in EM, in response and recovery phases? What does that all look like to any degree?
Right. Yes, you are correct that there is a number of different volunteer organizations active in disasters, especially faith-based groups. And in fact, during COVID, there was a number of them that had brought in a large amount of resources, including food, donations, water, diapers, stuff like that, that again, like you said, because of the fact that we have very little grocery and the supply chain was severely impacted during that time, that and not only just the fact that there was limited movement and plus the lockdown itself on the Navajo Nation, we had to have other ways to be able to get supplies and food distributed to not only the Navajo Nation, but like Hickory Apache Nation, Mescalero Apache Nation, and all of the different pueblos as well. So, and a large number of them were through the faith-based organizations as well. So we had the Methodists. In fact, I have a really good friend of mine that we still stay in touch through the his Methodist Association, because he is one of the key leads through our BOADs, that if we need something up in the Farmington area, the northwestern area of New Mexico, he's always stepping up to help whatever tribe or whatever community it is that needs help up in there. Just such great people, so many of them, and a lot of them just do it out of the goodness of their hearts. I think we know that. And the majority of the time, I'd say 99.9% of the time, they're welcome in the community to be able to help. So in fact, a lot of volunteer agencies are, in fact, Team Rubicon. I've brought them to the Navajo Nation at least 4 times. And I know that right now they were out in Gallup, and I don't know if they shut down yet, but they were helping with the vaccinations out there as well too. FEMA was out there helping out with the vaccination efforts as well too. So yeah, they are welcome in a number of communities. I haven't seen very, very much. In fact, I've seen very, very little of any type of, well, we don't want them here, we don't need your help. I hardly ever see that. I mean, that's rare that anybody would ever do that, turning away or refusing any type of help or assistance from any type of OAD. So usually, well, they're usually very welcome.
All right, cool. So, oh, wait, one more thing. Sam put another question in the chat. Could you share an example of crafty solution that you and or your team came up with on the spot in your EM or volunteer firefighting experience?
You or your team came up. Crafty solution. I think the crafty solution that we came up with was, let me see. Gosh, I think with everything, there's always been some type of ability to do things on your own. I think the main thing that I can share with everyone is that as an emergency manager, even as a tribal member, one of the things that I unfortunately share with all of my trainings is that FEMA tells us to be prepared, be on your own, to be able to be on your own, sustain yourself for at least 72 hours. It's the training, right? Is that what everybody gets? And what I tell people is we can't depend on FEMA. FEMA will never make us whole again. It's not meant to. It's always meant to be able to help. Even with individual assistance, people think that individual assistance that is going to make people whole again, that it's going to rebuild their lives. It's not. The max amount of, and I don't know if any of you have done any type of IA work, but the max amount is like, I think right now, $35,500 for a home. And if you lose everything, including your home, including everything else, it's, I think they're under, so there's IA, ONA, and IHP, individual assistance, other needs assistance, and individual households program. So out of all of that, you have to basically lose everything to be able to get the maximum amount of financial assistance. And as I mentioned, the maximum amount of financial assistance, $35,500 right now for this consumer year, according to the Consumer Price Index. Anyway, so that and the fact that FEMA may never come. And on tribal lands, help hardly ever comes like that. So I always tell our people to always make sure that you're able to sustain yourself. And what COVID has taught us is to be able to make sure that you can take care of your community. And I tell our tribal leaders, I tell all tribal leaders to always be considerate of being able to feed your own people, because a nation isn't truly sovereign unless they can feed themselves. And that includes the US. That includes us as communities. So like myself and my daughter is 13 now, and she was able to help me find, she's right here. She was able to help me to be able to build my own gardening and that sustainability through our own gardening methods. And so like we are able to grow our own corn, our own carrots, our own lettuce, our own spinach, our own sweet peas, pumpkins, that type of stuff. And so, and one thing that my family did was we butcher sheep. And so when meat prices were going sky high this COVID, I reminded our people, hey, we have traditional methods that were taught to us that we need to go back to. Let's butcher that sheep to help feed families. Let's build those garden and those tribal community gardens so that we can be able to do this for ourselves. We've done it for over a millennia. We shouldn't be, depending on other people. We know that help's not going to come. So we have to step up and help our own communities. We have to step up and help our own families. So one of the things that I did is I always made sure that everybody, including all my friends, all my family, knew that it was coming, that to be prepared. And one of the things that crafty solution I did was that I was able, during COVID, I reminded everyone that they all have the ability to be able to stay home, and that they all had the ability to be able to build a network of people that are like, so you have tribal populations here. I had 5 families on the res, and I had 3 families, 2 in Albuquerque and 1 in Phoenix. And so what they did is the families on the res, they would put together their lists, and they would say, okay, we need this, 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 and this. And so they would connect with us. They'd give us their lists. And what we would do is we would we would purchase, because there's no way I could afford it by myself to be able to feed 5 families back home on the res. So everybody, including the families on the res, everybody would pitch in, and we would pitch in money for sheep. We would pitch in money for food. We would pitch in money for water, and everyone would work together, and we would take turns going back and forth for the whole entire year, going back and forth, making sure that we had everything, making sure that there was tissue, make sure that there was food, that there was meat, that there was everything that we could to be able to take care of each other. And we did it for a year and a half now, until they were able to get their vaccinations. So we did it. No, not one family member got it. All of us were able to make it happen. All of us took care of each other, and all of us stepped up to make sure that we all were able to take care of each other, take care of our elders, our grandmothers, our grandfathers, even the ones in the deep res that needed help. And we did it. We did it. And so I just reminded people, just, you can do it. It's just a matter of being able to coordinate with each other and not think that you're the only one, because you're not the only one. And you're not the only one to have to go through this by yourself. There's plenty of people that have gone through it, gone through something similar, or gone through, like I said, some of the stuff that has happened with emergency management. I've got stories. I have got stories about when I wish I had a PIO in the EOC, when I wish I had, people helping me in the EOC, and where it went wrong, where things went severely wrong, and I had to try and fix everything. So there's always live and learn. There's always, hindsight is 2020, but that's the main thing. Like I said, it's just coordinating with other people and making sure that you reach out to others so that you can help each other.
Wow. Yeah, definitely. Coordination's important, communication's important, sharing of procedures, protocols, and all sorts of, training information, plans, so much of that networking, all that is so important, because then you can put it into action in a situation where it is obviously most needed, right? When things are dire, at their most dire. So definitely. Peyton Russo said powerful example of collective action. Yeah, I guess it's the social scientist, it's sort of a student in me is thinking of like collective action problems. I guess that's supposed to be like collective action, solutions. I guess it would be the way to word that. So I wanted to ask the individuals who, like you showed us on that list of contributors to the PDF you showed us about tribal EM subject matter, with FEMA. So individuals who work in EM in the tribal territories, are they pretty much, always or most of the time, people who grow up in those territories, in those cultures, in those groups, or do you ever get people from just, people who work in like state of Arizona or state of New Mexico, governmental EM stuff, who come into like tribal EM because they think it's a cool opportunity, or they're just really intrigued by it, or what's that look like usually?
We get both.
Okay.
We get both. But most of the tribal EM people, the majority of them have grown up in those communities. And most of them have. And there's not many that are in those positions that came from outside. There's not many like that, at least in the tribal or the state sector. But I did see it in the federal sector a lot. I was actually kind of disappointed when I saw the federal sector, and I'm like, ooh, that's a tribal liaison. Like, oh.
Oh, really? Like what, someone you thought was like not a good fit for it?
Yeah, more than once. And I was like, oh no. Yeah, and that person never lasts long. Those people never last long at all. Yeah. So they normally, you see them come and go. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. Well, would anyone else like to ask anything? Unmute yourselves or ask anything in the chat before I close this out. Open the floor. Don't be shy. Okay, cool. Well, yeah, we definitely had some great Q&A. And thank you once again, Rose, for the presentation, for some really interesting Q&A, for giving us such a glimpse into this world and so many things we can learn from it and also apply to EM in a variety of jurisdictions and levels of government. And so we're going to make sure to send out this recording to our membership. We're going to make sure to send out links you'd like to send us, such as that FEMA PDF and your slides and your LinkedIn profile and all that wonderful stuff. And thank you once again. Round of applause for Rose.
I also put my email in the chat for you all, and then also my cell phone number if you guys have any questions or need a referral or anything. I'm all about supporting those that come along. I'll tell you a cool tribal thing that was given to me when I was in science. I heard there was a native doctor, and she said, make sure and always go when you're looking at your future to always look, and when you're talking to other people and when you're doing outreach to other people, always reach out with both hands. And when you're reaching out with one hand in front of you, yes, for asking for help, but what you're also doing is you're reaching for those behind you as well. So always reach out with both hands in front of you and behind you for the ones behind you. And so please, if any of you guys need any type of assistance or any type of questions that I can help you with, I've been in the field long enough. I was in 2004 is when I was working with Governor Napolitano and her Homeland Security as her tribal liaison, and worked in DC at the national level, worked at the tribal level, and then now here I am working at the international level with to international companies. So really excited, and if you guys need help or have any questions that I can help with, I'm more than welcome to. I'm more than happy to help all of you.
Yeah, no, thank you. We really appreciate that. Yeah, we really appreciate just you being here at our meeting and that help you're willing to extend with references and networking and everything. And so it always means a lot, to a group of students, for speakers who are willing to be so kind and help us get that started in the career world and help make a difference ultimately in positions we can come into in the EM world. So thank you for that. So once again, huge thanks. I'll keep the Zoom open for a little bit. I'll stick around. Anyone wants to ask me anything or just bring up anything, chill out. And thank you once again, Rose. It was a really cool talk. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you all too. I support each and every one of you. Thank you so much. And I guess I am done.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you too. Thank you, Kyle.
Thank you.
Thank you, Peyton. Thank you, Samuel. Thank you all. Thank you so much, Stefan.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, awesome. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to log off now.
Yeah, for sure. You can if you'd like.
Great.